So here we are with another budget gaming PC that will cost around $300 to $350, and let's see how well it can game in 2022. Hey guys, and welcome to another video, and right here I have the budget gaming PC that will retail for around $300 to $350 if you get all the parts used. And I mean, it's doable, but who knows, when this video comes up it might even gone up to $500 or maybe even more. You never know with the used market. So let's go over the parts that I used in this. So the motherboard is an ASRock Z77 Extreme6. And I paired it with an Intel Core i7-4770K, which is a 4-core and 8-threaded CPU with a base clock of 3.5 GHz and a boost clock of 3.9. And for the test I did overclock it, quite mildly, just 4 GHz, but it might be able to go to 4.2, even higher. But I wanted to put in a state that anyone could reach it. And it is cooled by the Enermax Liqmax 3120 RGB AIO liquid cooler. And we have 16 GB of Corsair HyperX 2400 MHz DDR3 RAM. And it is working flawlessly. With XMP I use it on the overclocked settings, not on the stock, then everything is untouched. And for our graphics card, we have an Asus ROG Strix GTX 980Ti. And we have a 250 GB SSD, a 500 GB hard drive. And everything is powered by the Corsair RM750X. And the case is the Gamermax White Diamond Tempered Glass ARGB. So before we talk about each game, I ran them in 1080p, 1440p and 4K, both in stock and overclock configuration. And I'm just doing a mild overclock that should be sustainable by anyone. But if you can target it and get it even higher, that's awesome. So let's start with Shadow the Tomb Raider, and running it in the high preset with no motion blur, no VSync, and anti-aliasing is set to TAA. And in 1080p we could see a 7 FPS improvement in overclocked configuration. And I mean, it's definitely playable. If you want higher FPS, you just lower the settings. And in 1440p we saw a 5 FPS improvement. So we get over 60 FPS in 1440p when you overclock the system. And in 4K you get a 3 FPS improvement. Still it's over 30 FPS, so for some people that is playable, but not for all of them. But if you lower the settings you could get higher. But I standardized on using high, so you get the almost worst performance imaginable. So Far Cry 6, running it with a high preset, anti-aliasing set to TAA, no VSync, no motion blur. And in 1080p we got a 7 FPS improvement when you overclocked it, so you reached 59 FPS. So tweak some settings and get it with 60. And in 1440p we got a 5 FPS improvement, so we got 47 FPS, average of course, and just lower it a little bit. On the graphical settings, maybe put some settings like shadows and so on down to medium, and playable experience. And in 4K we got 2 FPS improvement, and we got 30 FPS when we overclocked it. So 4K 30, doable with this system. So this could be pretty good entry-level 4K 30 FPS experience. But I would lower the settings to get much more smoother frame rate. So in Assassin's Creed Valhalla, we used it high preset, no VSync, no motion blur. And in 1080p we got a 4 FPS improvement over the stock settings, so we get 59 FPS. And the same thing applies there, just adjust the settings to your liking to get a much smoother experience. And in 1440p we got a 3 FPS improvement, so we get 46 FPS. And in 4K we got a 1 FPS improvement. Wow! So, Assassin's Creed Valhalla, 4K, nah, I wouldn't do it. But some of you might just take all these settings down to perhaps low or mix low and medium to get a more smoother experience. But I would stick to 1440p. And then comes the big disappointment. Cyberpunk 2077. Running it with a mix of high and medium settings, with no motion blur, no VSync as always. And in 1080p, we got the same performance, 38 FPS. So this needs some real tweaking to get it running highly, but Cyberpunk is, well, it's Cyberpunk. And 1440p actually got a 3 FPS improvement. We got it up to 27 FPS. Could you imagine that? So now we come to 4K, and this is really odd because all the performance just went down the drain. We went from 12 FPS in stock configuration down to 8 FPS in overclocked. That is terrible. And here's some footage of it at 8 FPS. And then we come to Resident Evil Village, running it in high settings with no VSync. And this is very well optimized and a great experience. In 1080p you get over 100 FPS, which is awesome, at least when you overclock it. And in 1440p, doesn't matter if you use it stock or overclock it, you get at least 60 FPS, awesome. And in 4K, both stock and overclocked, you get at least 30 FPS. So there you could improve the performance by lowering the settings and mixing it to your liking. So what can we say about this? It is a good 1080p and some made a 1440p gaming experience, and could, if I should stretch it, I would call it a entry level 4K, but not on everything. Of course, I mean that comes as no surprise, I imagine. I mean it has some value for it. You get one hell of a system for the price, at least in today's market. So that's everything I had for you today. I hope you enjoyed it. Leave a like if you did, and don't forget to subscribe, and I'll see you all very soon in the next one.